Up until this point, the special effects that I've been showing you have really been related to color, applying duotone effects and creating black and white photography and neat things like that. This next effect really is a special effect, and it's kind of hard for me to describe what it is that I want to create with you, but I'll attempt it here anyway. What I want to do is I want to create these, this is going to sound crazy, these spires of glowing light. Now, stick with me. This is going to, I don't want to lose you here. This is going to be really cool. We're going to create these spirals of glowing light, a real tactile example of a special effect, if you will. And if you're sitting there going, this sounds campy and cheesy, stick with me, because a lot of the things that we're going to do in this exercise, you can apply in so many different ways to your own work. So maybe this will sort of trigger something with you or make you think of something. And the cool thing here too is we're going to be combining a lot of the different things that we've seen up until this point. We're going to be using the pen tool, we're going to be using the brush tool, we're going to be using the paths panel, and we're going to be applying layer effects. So this is the real power, in my opinion, of Photoshop, is it isn't just about the pen tool isolated by itself, or it isn't just about, for example, Photoshop filters all by themselves or adjustment layers, but when you start combining all these things together, that's when real magic starts to happen. So I'm going to go and open up our next project file. So go ahead and choose File, Open, or double click on your gray background. And we have an image called tower.jpg. Go ahead and pop that guy open. This is a photo taken by photographer Tina Phillips. And essentially what I want to do, if I just zoom in here a little bit, is I want to create this spiraling light effect that's going to essentially wrap itself all the way around the tower or the castle or whatever you want to call this thing, and all the way out the top. That's the idea, right? So hopefully that sounds like fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab the pen tool. Just hit the P key on your keyboard. And just take a second and double check on the options bar that you are creating paths and that you indeed have the pen tool selected. And what I'm going to do, I'll just zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to start off at the top here. Is actually, you know what, maybe I zoomed in a little too close, maybe about there, is I'm going to start maybe about here, and what I'm going to do is click and drag to the left, something like this. And of course I get my teeter-totter direction lines. We know all about those guys, right? So maybe something like that, and then I'll bring my cursor down to maybe about here, and then I'll click and drag in the opposite direction, something like this, right? Because what I want is I want a curve that goes to the left, and we know all about curves, right? So maybe something like that, or you can hold down Command or Control and reposition that anchor point there if you want, maybe something like that. And then what I want to do is I want to bring my cursor down about the same distance, maybe down to about here, and then click and drag in the opposite direction, something like this. Make sure that your curve goes out beyond the edge of the tower. That's kind of important. So maybe something like that, or, if you want, you can drag it out a little bit further, maybe something like this, right? There we go, something like that. Again, I'm just holding down Command or Control, and I'll bring my cursor down to about this point here, and I'll click and drag now to the right, something like that. There we go. And then we'll just continue this sort of this spiral pattern all the way down to the base of the tower, something like this. Now, if you want a very tight, like a tightly wound spiral, put your anchor points closer together. If you want a looser spiral, you can spread your anchor points out a little bit further. Whatever you want, really, it's entirely up to you. There we go, maybe something like that. And I'll finish off maybe with one more. There we go, something like that. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. The next thing that I want to do is I actually want to apply some color to this path that you and I just created. As a matter of fact, what I want to do is I want to stroke this path. And I don't think I've shown you this yet. So you're going to see some things that you haven't seen just yet, but try and stick with me here. I'm going to flip over to the brush tool now. Go ahead and grab your paintbrush tool out of the toolbox. And something that I didn't show you earlier when we were looking at the painting techniques inside Photoshop is when I drop down my presets window from the options bar, and of course we have all these different brushes that we can make use of, right? But if you head up to this flyout menu in the top right corner, there's even more brush libraries that we can make use of. We have, for example, the faux finish brushes, natural brushes, rounded brushes, and thick, heavy brushes, all kinds of stuff. And what I'm going to go after is I want the calligraphic brushes. Go ahead and choose those fellas. And you're going to get a warning here. Photoshop wants to know if you want to replace the existing brushes or simply add the calligraphic brushes onto the end of the existing brushes. I'm just going to say okay, and that's just going to replace them. No big deal, though. We can always get our original brushes back. I'm going to choose this guy right here, the flat 28 pixel brush. Now, you might want to experiment. Maybe if you watch this one time through, and then you might want to, when you're actually going through this on your own, or maybe going through it the second time, you might want to experiment and try different brushes, different brush sizes, and so on. So I'm going to go with the 28 pixel flat, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to change his size down to about 12 or 13 pixels, I think would be just fine. I'll hit enter to lock that in. Okay, now the next thing that I want to do is I want to set some options inside Photoshop's brushes panel, and we haven't seen the brushes panel yet. I'll head to the window menu and then down to brush, or you can hit F5 on your keyboard if you want. And again, if you want to go through this a second time, this exercise a second time or a third time, you might want to mess around with a lot of the different settings that we have here, but I'm going to keep it fairly simple. I want shape dynamics. And I'm going to increase my jitter to maybe about 20 or 25%, somewhere in there. And I want to make sure that my drop-down menu here is set to pen pressure. Okay, great.